some great sessions to get through. And first of all, we are going to hear about harmonising standards for bio-based to accelerate buyer uptake. And to tell you all about this panel, delighted to welcome partner at ERM, Richard Platt. Richard.
Come on up then. Hi everyone, welcome to the afternoon on the second day. Good to see some people still here, that's good. So I'm a partner at ERM. We're the largest sustainability-focused consultancy globally. This afternoon we're going to talk about how we can get more alignment across supply chains around how we judge bio-based, but also end-of-life and captured feedstocks to make chemicals and materials. So, reducing GHG emissions of products and also corporate greenhouse gas emissions, as well as moving away from virgin fossil feedstocks, are key targets by brand and end consumers. And alternative feedstocks, biogenic, end-of-life, and capturing carbon are ways of achieving this and will be needed. We often hear and discuss the cost of these is too high, beyond the willingness to pay. And there's a lot of focus on this and policies needed in that area to close that gap. But there are other barriers, and some of those other barriers is how to judge their sustainability. So giving an example, we're talking to customers and there are becoming available bio-based materials for them, and they offer a lower greenhouse gas carbon intensity. But sometimes they say, okay, well, how about the water use? How about the land use change? We're worried about this. We don't want to get involved in this because of the sustainability risks. And some of the issues are because we don't have a clear understanding of how to judge those and have a clear agreement across the industry and globally. So that creates hesitation for buyers, and it doesn't send clear signals to suppliers either. So today we've got a great panel who have been collaborating on this topic under WBCSD's Alternative Feedstocks Initiative and with its members. And ERM has been contributing and supporting that process. So I'll let the panel introduce themselves before we get going. Zoe?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Efthymiadou. I work in the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. As Richard mentioned, or the WBCSD, as we call it. We are a CEO-led organization with more than 250 members globally. We work with them to help them advance their sustainability ambitions. And we work in quite a few areas of sustainability, but I personally work in the circularity space, and even more specifically with the Alternative Feedstocks project that Richard mentioned. Now, this project sits under our value chain action area of work and focuses basically on helping our members with their decarbonization efforts through the use of circular products and materials. And the Alternative Feedstocks more specifically focuses more upstream, and its main end goal, let's say, it is to highlight the most efficient pathways for alternative feedstocks adoption by global value chains. And now, very, very quickly, in the objectives of the project, I can say that they span from stakeholder mobilization through why substituting fossil with alternative feedstocks are important, and then developing efficient solution pathways to address some of the barriers that we currently have. Then our second objective is to define what we basically mean by alternative feedstocks, and also define a set of minimum criteria to assess if a feedstock is alternative or not. And in this objective, we're currently working towards publishing a white paper in collaboration with ERM and our member companies. And then a big piece of work is around addressing cost barriers through building demand and optimizing procurement pathways. And last but not least, we also have an objective of identifying any remaining barriers after doing all this work applied in specific value chains, and then working with our members towards resolving them. Thank you.
Yeah, hi. Rupert Posner here from Unilever. I'm guessing most of you are aware of the company. We have, I think, nearly 4 billion consumers who use our products every day. And the challenge for us is that I sit in the home care part of the business, and the vast majority of our footprint is chemical feedstocks. And we have this unique challenge, or not unique, but particular challenge where, because they're made from fossil feedstocks, when they go down the drain and biodegrade, CO2 emissions go into the atmosphere. We're also in a highly competitive sector where consumers are not interested in paying a green premium when the product does exactly the same thing. So my role is to lead our advocacy work to see what change we can get in the world, and heard lots of conversations here over the last 2 days about the policy changes that we need. So I'm focused on what do we need to change in the world to enable companies like yourselves to be providing us with the products we need at the right price and in the volumes that we need.
Thank you. And last but not least, my name is Fabian Nüse. I am Lifecycle Manager at Evonik. Evonik is a specialty chemicals company. We are part of a lot of value chains that we already heard about today. My specific role is LCA consultancy internally. I'm working closely with our procurement department when it comes to collecting supplier data, primary data, collecting it, validating it, quality checking it, and then on the outgoing side also supporting our businesses when it comes to communicating these results with our customers to fulfill specific requests from customers.
Thanks. Okay, Zoe, when we think about harmonizing definitions and sustainability criteria for alternative feedstocks into chemicals and materials, what's the status of this, from you've heard from your members, and where are the remaining gaps that we really need to focus on?
Yeah, so I can see and I can say that today we see increasing convergence, but unfortunately we are not at 100% harmonization yet. We see increasing convergence on the role of alternative feedstocks in decarbonization and circular economy efforts. We see the increasing importance of sustainability performance assessment, and we also see the increasing need for credible traceability systems. And that's progress, and that's great. However, there are some gaps. But before I go into that, I would like to make the important distinction. You already kind of said it, Richard, but there's a difference between alternative feedstocks in the fuel sector and alternative feedstocks in the chemicals and materials sector. Because the first one has benefited a lot from the renewable energy and climate policy environment. And it's more mature and more harmonized compared to the chemicals and materials space that it's still in early stages. So the gaps that I'm going to mention next is going to be mostly about the chemicals and materials space. Now, the first one that I would like to mention is definitions, of course, because currently there is not 100% consistency in the definitions that exist out there, and especially from the angle of if they are accepted by different jurisdictions. And the differences might be small, but when you try to scale markets, these differences can create quite the challenging environment. Then a second gap that I would like to mention is probably the sustainability criteria and the assessment methods, because currently there's no quick and credible way that can help companies in decision making and deciding if a feedstock is, as we call it, alternative or not, in the sense of if it delivers the impact, the decarbonization impact it intends to deliver, also keeping in mind burden shifting, of course, with other sustainability areas. And the third gap that I would like to mention is basically the chain of custody models environment, because as value chains become more and more complex, and feedstocks also more and more complex, more mixed, more developed, so does also the allocation and the tracking of their sustainability attributes, especially when it comes to different companies using different chain of custody models. Because also here, even the smallest nuances can be quite challenging when a single claim has been made in one system, and we would like to make sure that it was correctly translated and interpreted in another system. So all in all, and to close the answer to this question, because I might be speaking a lot. The progress is there, and that's great. However, as we're moving from a space of alternative feedstocks are important to a space of we need to scale, then harmonization is 100% important in making sure that the confidence is there for the different players in the value chain to get this work moving further.
Thanks, Zoe. So, I mean, I guess to summarize, you said that definitions of like what we call alternative feedstocks, people are calling things different terms, you know, bio-based, renewable, sometimes they're interchangeable, sometimes used differently, sometimes defined differently. Then how do you judge their sustainability across different impact factors, okay, carbon, water, etc.? That's been done differently. And then how do you trace that through the supply chain, the chain of custody mechanisms? These are also not aligned. So my next question to you, maybe, is, okay, with all this misalignment, how does that impact your ability to scale more chemicals and materials as Evonik because of that lack of alignment?
Yeah. If I look at our position in the value chain, then switching to alternative feedstocks almost always requires upfront investment. That can be investment in new assets, new supply chains, new partnerships, and so on. And therefore, we need market signals, of course, to scale up. Currently, I would say we are in a transition period where we see standards are evolving, common definitions are being formulated, which definitely helps. But at the moment, we have to make some investment decisions that happen under a certain degree of uncertainty, of course, and that's not really helpful. Therefore, we are actively engaging in the WBCSD activities, of course, because we expect that with an increase in alignment, we will also see this demand, market pressure more visible and also more predictable. And that's what we need in our situation in order to scale alternative feedstocks as well.
Thanks. And to you, Rupert, and as a buyer, Unilever, and so how do you see those issues? And what are the other issues that you're seeing that are stopping you really scaling with your suppliers?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a fundamental issue because we're already investing in a number of companies and technologies and buying products, but the reality is we're going to need to shift considerably. But we're also at the same time pushing for governments to have policies to support it. And it's a globally integrated value chain and we operate across the globe. So we need to have as much alignment as we can. At the moment we get feedstocks largely from the Middle East because it comes from oil. We're going to look to get alternative feedstocks that will come, some from Europe, others from other markets as well, and they'll move around. So we need to have alignment amongst all of that so people can make the right investment decisions, and we can also make sure that if we have compliance requirements later on, which we're happy with, or happy to have, that we're buying things or investing in things that align with that. So that's very important for us. There are also one of the challenges for us is that we're very visible. So we're the company that's most likely to be targeted if something isn't appropriate. And so this is why we need to make sure that we take civil society along with us and they understand environment groups and other organisations, although to be honest, largely they don't understand the chemical issue anyway. So the first thing we have to do is educate them and let them know that fossil fuels aren't just used for energy and that we can't grind up a wind turbine or a solar panel and turn it into a surfactant. So we can't shift all fossil fuels to renewable energy that simply. So we have to take them on that journey as well, because we've got to make sure that we don't have backlash. And what's interesting at the moment, in some ways, it's almost like the environmental hurdle. We need to make sure it's at the appropriate level because we don't want to make it ridiculously high and there are all these extra obligations that need to be met that aren't being met somewhere else. But at the same time, we've got to make sure that we don't have perverse outcomes. And so that's why developing these standards, getting consistency, getting broad stakeholder engagement in it, and then getting governments to adopt them is really important.
Yeah, thanks, Rupert. I mean, it's great to hear Unilever's view and see you're very, as a mature company in terms of sustainability, thinking about these things. But what, as an era, and we work with lots of organisations at different levels of maturity, and sometimes what we see is, they haven't thought about these issues yet. That doesn't mean they don't want to. It just means they don't have the capability yet, and maybe they haven't got there. And I guess what that potentially creates is a different ask from customers. It'd be great if you can maybe elaborate on what that means for a chemical company when, chemicals by definition, and often materials, you have lots of different customers in different sectors, and they're asking for different things. I guess the question we've been talking about, and it'd be good to hear more views on this, is, are they necessarily need to ask for different things, or actually could there be more alignment? And that would help, right? So yeah, it'd be good to hear your view on that.
Yeah, sure. I think you made our situation quite clear. I mean, as a chemical company, we are part of a lot of value chains. We have customers in many different markets, and every different market has its own specifications, own requirements, and so on. So what we see in terms of sustainability priorities, for example, we see customers that are very advanced, that want to have a full LCA, others just are fine with the carbon footprint, others just are starting to get engaged in these kind of topics. And what we as Evonik usually try to do, of course, try to align as early as possible with our customers in order to understand what are your core needs, what are your requirements. And internally, we try to solve this in putting a lot of effort in the last month into automation, trying to involve AI as well here in order to match these kind of needs. Just as an example, we are currently automating our LCA process, for example, in order to be able to deliver a lot of results also that go beyond just carbon footprint data, for example, but also other impact categories when you already mentioned when it comes to biodiversity topics, water use, and so on. So we definitely see that there are different maturity states of our customers, but our approach allows us to have this flexibility of answering every request that we get in a different maturity level, I would say.
Yeah, understood. I mean, it'd be good. I mean, how much are you being asked for beyond carbon impacts? Is that always, or is it very minimal customers in certain segments?
It's still the minority, I would say, but we really see that there's development and that companies around us are building more capabilities here, not only on the customer side, but also on the supplier side. And that's really good to see. And this is also due to the fact that I think there are standards out there, there is alignment more and more that helps them to have kind of guardrails in which they can operate.
Yeah, okay, fair. So maybe it'd be good to, mention the white paper earlier that's been developed. Maybe just can pick up on that and give a bit more description about what it's going to include and who can use it really when it comes out.
Yes, sure. So as I mentioned before, this white paper will be on our second objective, which is to define what an alternative feedstock actually means and how we can assess it, basically. It will include shared definitions for the different alternative feedstock categories, the bio-based, carbon feedstocks, end of life, carbon capture feedstocks, etc. It will include a common set of criteria to assess if a feedstock is alternative or not. As I mentioned, that will include also environmental and socioeconomic criteria, and then a structured approach for assessment, basically. We're currently in our first consultation period for this white paper and currently planning to launch it soon, September 2026, maybe not so soon, but for us it's quite soon. And in general, I see the white paper as providing a common ground, the shared taxonomy, the common set of criteria, the approach to assess. It provides this common language, this common reference point, as we call it, for different players in the value chain to start work together, basically. Because in the end, harmonization in itself, it's not the end goal. Scaling markets is. And without the underlying systems being aligned, that won't be possible, to be honest. So in the end, I see the white paper as basically an enabling step. It will increase comparability. It will reduce, on the other hand, fragmentation within the value chain. And it will create the space for the next phase of the project that we're having at the moment, which basically it will include our work with chain of custody models that will address also the third gap that I mentioned, basically seeing how they can support scaling of alternative feedstocks. This is work we have already started. We're still in early stages and we expecting this to be unveiled more towards the summer and September. But also a big piece of work, as I mentioned before, will be addressing the cost barriers that currently exist. And this will be done by aggregating the volumes that we need and also optimizing the current procurement pathways, ultimately aiming to provide access to the volumes, so the price competitive volumes of alternative feedstocks that we need.
Thanks. So this work is very much private sector driven, with a group of WBCSD members from across the supply chain, and that's fantastic, right? Because there's some alignment in the industry, but there is a risk, and we've seen this happen before, where the industry and the supply chains align, and then governments go and do something slightly different. Yeah, and so maybe this is a question to Rupert. How can we within industry work with government to try and get to a point where there is consistency, and they understand and pick up these important points and put them into policy, so that, because ideally then if they're in policy in many jurisdictions and aligned, then we create a very clear demand signal. And it'd be good to hear your view on how that can happen and what's happening and how we can take these kind of things forward.
Yeah, sure. So, there is a lot of engagement from government on this issue at the moment, particularly here in Europe, where there are a whole lot of reviews and policies that are coming up. I think that the challenge for us is to look for things that can deliver impact and focus on the things that count. We're not going to solve all of this immediately, but we do need to be shifting the volumes quite considerably. And so we need to, we want to buy tens of thousands of tonnes, not kilos of materials. And so we do need to be looking at how we can do that. We do need to, when we talk to government, understand the challenges. At the moment, the EU has a policy of it wants to do more and it wants to do less at the same time. So it wants to simplify, but then it also wants to address the chemical industry's competitiveness and climate challenges. So we've got to be smart and focused. We're not going to get everything. So what can make a difference, what things will start to change and support where we need to go. So there is a good opportunity to engage with government. We need to work together as much as we can, because when we provide a consistent approach, we won't always agree on everything, then that's easier for government. We need to be providing them with very specific solutions. So we can't just say we want a hand. What's the specific policy? How would it work? Who would it be applied to? What's the time frame? What's the cost? Because at the end of the day, the consumer pays for everything. So whether it's through higher prices that we pay, pass on to consumers, whether it's through taxes or whether it's from lower company returns, the consumer pays for everything. And so what we've got to be thinking about is how can the consumer, whether it's through any of those, is investing in change so that it's getting a return rather than just paying for something? And how do we ensure that it's getting a good investment?
Thanks, Rupert. Yeah, I agree. So we've talked a lot about alignment, sustainability criteria, and then we've talked about, then hopefully policymakers putting some of this into practice. I guess it'd be good to hear any of the panel's view on the fact that when we've seen work to try and put in policy in chemicals and materials, it has always been delayed or has been challenged. And part of that has often been because there's a real complexity in the chemicals and materials space between many value chains, different applications, different end of life of those products. So it'd be good to hear some views on maybe like how can those barriers be overcome? Yeah, because there is a risk potentially that happens again and things go very slowly because of that. Rupert, you want to start on that one?
Yeah, it's a really difficult time at the moment because we're seeing there's all sorts of insecurities that are going on in the world at the moment. How do we keep governments focused on this? I think what's important is we've got to, whenever we're engaging with government, the same way that we engage with a supplier or a customer is understanding their perspective. And so we've got to think how it solves their problem, not how it solves our problem. I do think there's an opportunity for there to be government investment that delivers substantial private investment, so leverages greater private investment. We've got assets that are being closed down around the world. How do we repurpose them to be used for a clean chemical industry? So thinking about how can we try and drive some of those things that deliver the local jobs, local security issues, and address decarbonisation as well.
Yeah, and we've heard over the conference and we hear that weekly through our conversations that we have at ERM with our clients about the disruption of the conventional industry and the price spike, yeah, and across chemicals and fertilizers and materials. So, you know, obviously right now with the oil price it is, a lot of the biosolutions look very attractive. But, you know, what I guess has happened in the past is that if the oil price comes down again, everyone seems to forget that that's happened, yeah? So it'd be great, you know, from my perspective, is if the policymakers can understand and the companies can understand that, you know, that price spike is going to happen again. We don't know why, but you know, if you look in the past, there's been many supply side problems, yeah. And so we have a lot of raw materials, alternative materials in Europe, and it's about how can we identify the ones and economically get them to the chemical industry and to the materials and to the customers. Yeah. I think we're getting near time, and maybe what we can do is, you know, one extra comment about something else that you think needs to be addressed, or something positive that you've seen, a project that you love, that you maybe just want to share with the audience before we finish.
Yeah, I can start. As I said in the introduction, I'm working closely with our sustainability procurement department when it comes to collecting primary data. And I've been doing this for a few years now, and I think what's really great to see is that suppliers from the chemical industry, at least, are really adopting these kind of topics. We see that they are maturing a lot. We see also the kind of data that we were requesting a few years ago was much lower than what we receive now. And we are getting to points where we really need to think about how are we automating data, because the amount is increasing so much. So I think this is a really good sign to see that, okay, initiatives are working and companies are building capabilities in that area. I think that's a good sign and will continue to do so.
Thanks.
Yeah, there's no doubt that there is momentum building in this. So, you know, people, policymakers, environment groups weren't even aware that chemicals were being used to make so many things. The whole focus of fossil fuels was on energy. Look, it's still largely there, but we are starting to see some movement there. You know, I was at an event with an MEP a couple of years ago and had to explain it's what's in the bottle that matters. And then, you know, just a couple of weeks ago, the same MEP was in a panel completely engaged in understanding of what's going on and pushing for policy change. So a real transition there. The other bit as well is, so my work's not just in Europe, it's in other markets around the world as well. And so in China, in India, Brazil, in other markets, there is starting to be some momentum on this. So I'm optimistic that we're going to see some significant change. I think if we can get this alignment on definitions, that should enable more sort of global interaction on this, which I think is really important.
Thanks.
Yeah, as the last person to answer this question, I think I will say the cliche thing, but the truth is that the thing that we needed is also stronger value chain and cross-sectoral collaboration, because without partnering with each other, we cannot reach the end goal. We cannot reach the end goal of accessing the price competitive that we want, alternative feedstocks. So, yeah.
Thanks. Okay, that's it. Thanks very much, panel. Thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you.